Maringa tells us. Kenya and the United Kingdom have also shared some frosty relations. Much of it, based on the Mau Mau rebellion, was a war in the British Kenya colony between 1920 and 1963 between the Kenya Land and Freedom Army KLFA, also known as the Mau Mau. And as the British authorities dominated by Kikuyu, Meru and Embu fighters, the KLFA also comprised of units of Kamba and Maasai who fought against the European colonists.
Now, the British Army and the local Kenya regiment, that is British colonists, local auxiliary militia and pro-British Kikuyu, George Maringa takes a careful look at the rough patches in the long relationship between Kenya and the UK.
The origin of the term Mau Mau is uncertain. However, it was informally christened Mzungu Arudi Ulaya, Mwafrika Apate Uhuru. The armed rebellion of the Mau Mau was the culminating response to colonial rule. Although there had been previous instances of violent resistance to colonialism, the Mau Mau revolt was the most prolonged and violent anti-colonial warfare in the British Kenya colony. From the start, land was the primary British interest in Kenya, which had some of the richest agricultural soils in the world, mostly in districts where the elevation and climate make it possible for Europeans to reside permanently. Though declared a colony in 1920, the formal British colonial presence in Kenya began with the proclamation on July 1, 1895, in which Kenya was claimed as a British protectorate.
Here in Kenya, we can speak openly and say there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And the contestation is about our shared past. That is major.
The British authorities suspended civil liberties in Kenya. Many Kikuyu were forced to move. According to British authorities, 80,000 were interned in squalid detention camps. It is estimated that between 160,000 and 320,000 were interned in detention camps, also known as concentration camps.
Long after the struggle, 60 years on, I cannot hesitate but say that there are relics of neo-colonial relations between us and British, in practical terms and in attitudes.
The capture of the rebel leader, Field Marshal Dedan Kimathi, on 21st October 1956 signaled the defeat of the Mau Mau and essentially ended the British military campaign. However, the rebellion survived until after Kenya's independence from Britain, driven mainly by the Meru units led by Field Marshal Musa Mwariyama. General Baimungi, one of the last Mau Mau leaders, was killed shortly after Kenya attained self-rule. Fast forward to 2023, 60 years later, His Majesty King Charles III did not offer an apology as had been expected, but expressed deep regret.
None of this can change the past, but by addressing our history with honesty and openness, we can perhaps demonstrate the strength of our friendship today.
The British Army Training Unit in Kenya, Batuk, is also another thorny argument. On 3rd June 1964, Duncan Sunday's Secretary of State for Commonwealth Relations signed a post-independence defense agreement with the new Kenyan government. Among its other provisions, it specified that British troops could exercise in Kenya twice a year. There have been concerns from a section of Kenyans about the presence of Batuk. Their allegations against Batuk include ethical breaches related to misconduct such as corruption, fraud, discrimination, abuse of power, and other unethical behaviors. Furthermore, the victims claim human rights violations, including sexual harassment, mistreatment, torture, unlawful detention, killings, and other violations of internationally recognized human rights standards. During his 4-day official visit to Kenya, King Charles III is facing demands to address the legacy of 8 decades of British colonial rule, as well as concerns over foreign ownership of valuable farmland and that accountability for the actions of British soldiers stationed in Kenya have not been adequately acknowledged. George Maringa, TV 47, Nairobi.
Thank you, George, for that. Now let's talk matters development.